Postcards from the Edge is not technically autobiographical, but I would put money on it being very heavily written from Carrie Fisher's own experiences, and that makes it quite emotional, but it's also fantastic. Now, it's not perfect because I find the structure to be not to my personal liking, but the style of writing, the character of Suzanne, and Carrie Fisher's voice, because it's very much written by her pen. You can hear her voice in this, are all weaved right throughout it, and it's an utter delight, a very unpredictable delight as well. This book was published actually much longer ago than I thought when I started to read it. It was published, I believe, in 1990, or maybe 1989, and it's about initially an individual called Suzanne who is in a rehab facility for taking drugs. She took an overdose. She had to have her stomach pumped. At the beginning of the book, she is writing diary entries from rehab. And then a few pages in, we get introduced to an individual called Alex. And Alex's chapters are not told through diary entries. They are basically internal monologues. First person, not as diary entry, just internal monologues. Basically stream of consciousness, but he is often on drugs, or he is coming down from drugs, or his body is screaming out for more drugs, and his thoughts are scattered and chaotic, and sentences run on. And I feel like Carrie Fisher really got into the spirit of that. I feel like the way the thoughts just spilled out onto the page is coming from a place of personal experience. I feel like to be able to write that successfully and accurately, or at least what I believe to be an accurate portrayal — I've never done drugs or had drug withdrawal — but to really get into that character's mindset like that and present it on the page so effectively, I definitely feel like this is coming from a place that she knows well, or knew well, unfortunately. So that's interesting enough. And then it switches, and we have a small section where it's basically a dialogue between Suzanne and another individual, but there are no names mentioned. It's all just he said, she said, which I thought was an unusual style choice. And then it switches again, and we have a brief dialogue between Suzanne and her therapist. Or it might have been the other way on. But either way, we quickly change locations. We get to the point where Suzanne is no longer in the rehab facility. And then I'd say the final half, the second half of the book, is all told first person perspective. From Suzanne's point of view, she is now living her life outside of rehab as an actress who has been given a part. You know, she feared that she would never work again, given what had happened. She's got a part. She's got a very mixed attitude to this, and we just follow her as she basically puts herself down on a constant basis, and the entire thing is like therapy for Suzanne, by which I mean I feel like writing this was therapy for Carrie. Everything that Suzanne thinks and feels about herself when she looks in the mirror, the way she constantly judges herself, the way she's constantly evaluating her life choices, things that have happened in her past, the way she dates men, or the choices she makes with regards to relationships, everything she says about herself, everything she feels that she lets the reader know about, could have come directly from the mouth of Carrie Fisher, which I believe wholeheartedly that most, if not all of it, did. And when you think about it like that, if you're a big Carrie Fisher fan like I am, it makes it a very emotional read. Suzanne is certainly a very fascinating character. I find her to be an interesting protagonist. I struggle to separate her and Carrie. And as I said, I would argue that they are, in many ways, one and the same. And I don't think Carrie wrote this novel to be entertaining. Maybe she wrote it — well, it is entertaining, it's highly entertaining, but I don't think she said, I want to write a novel because I want to entertain people. I think for her, and I just wish I could ask her this, I think she wrote it as a form of therapy. It would not surprise me if her therapist, or a psychiatrist she had in rehab or anything, said to her, write down your thoughts. And that's exactly what she's done. But being a fantastic writer that she is, she's turned it into a work of fiction for everybody to enjoy and to get some emotional connection out of. So there are two downsides to this. The first, as I said, I'm not the biggest fan of it going back and forth between narrative styles. So as I said, initially we start with the epistolary form in the diary entries, and then it's he said, she said, third person discussion, and then finally the second half we have first person following Suzanne. It took me a little while to get used to that, but once you make it to Suzanne's first person journey, you kind of forget about the change of tone and you get used to it. The other thing that I found unusual was the character of Alex and how much weight was put on this character in the beginning. It was good to show a different perspective of somebody on drugs. It was good to say that not everybody who ends up in rehab have the same experience. Alex does play a role later on, but for the most part he kind of disappears. And I feel like there was so much weight put on him in the beginning that he needed to have a more prominent point, at least at some point in the novel. So I think that character might have been a little bit, not underdeveloped, underused. Very well developed character, just he didn't feature as frequently as I feel he should have done. But that aside, it's incredible. If you like Carrie Fisher, you will love this. You will definitely get more out of this if you've read Shockaholic, Princess Diarist. I think they're kind of the two main ones that are wishful drinking as well. If you've read those ones where she speaks very openly and very honestly, you will be able to connect things that she says and feels in this book with things that she has said in her autobiographical content in her memoirs. However, you don't need to have read any of Carrie's work to enjoy this. I think it's a very honest account of life as a drug addict or former drug addict. As somebody who worships the ground Carrie Fisher walked on, it's a very emotional journey for me, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. Welled up a little bit when it finished, not necessarily because it was a particularly emotional ending, but because it was the end of a journey that I had just been on with the voice of somebody that I love. If you have never heard of Carrie Fisher, I think you will still enjoy it, but I think maybe it will be harder to get used to the narrative style, because I persevered because of Carrie. If I hadn't, I may have given up sooner, just because, as I said, I don't like the way it switched back and forth between narrator and narrative voice. But beyond that, it's pretty good. When I say it's pretty good, it's amazing. It's a beautiful read, an emotive read, and a very honest book, which I think is all anybody could have asked for. There are so many questions I would ask Carrie about this, but above all, I would just tell her thank you, because I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's very moving, and I think it's something that a lot of people will benefit from, will feel a kinship with, but ultimately will find appreciation in the honesty of Carrie Fisher's voice. I don't know many people who can write like that.